Have you ever been planning a pop-up in a shopping centre only to realise you're missing all the details you need? Stick with me because I'm about to share how to avoid all of these headaches once and for all. By the end of this video, you'll know the exact steps to navigate shopping centre pop-ups without blowing your budget or missing crucial deadlines. This is going to save you weeks of frustration and expenses you haven't even considered. So let's get into it. I'm going to take you through my shopping centre pop-up process. It's an approach I've developed over the last 15 years, working with some of the world's biggest brands and agencies doing pop-ups, brand activations, and experiential events. And this framework covers the checklist you need to launch a flawless pop-up activation in a shopping centre. Number 1, requirements recon. I once saw a marketing manager stunned by the shopping centre's requirement that she needed an engineer certificate for her display, and nobody told her until it was too late. Each shopping centre has got their own list of rules, specific load limits, fire safety protocols, and even aesthetic guidelines. But as a small business, brand or agency doing this for the first time, you're not going to know any of this walking into it. And if you have done a few of these before, the biggest mistake I see people make is that they think that the same standard rules apply in every centre. But in reality, every centre has got their own set of rules and requirements. If you don't find out about these requirements early, you risk spending money on rush fees or even tearing down half your design right before you're about to go live because it doesn't meet the requirements of the centre. This is why I call this part of the process the requirements recon. It's all about collecting the centre's guidelines, permits, and policies before you start your pop-up design. So here's what I do to make this happen. I ask the centre for their official guidelines, and they usually provide this to me in a PDF document or through an online portal. From there, I clarify if any engineer certificates are going to be required. If you don't know anything about engineer certificates, that's okay. I've got a 5-minute explainer video, which I'll put the details to in the description. And lastly, I check if there's any aesthetic restrictions. Some shopping centres don't allow large signs, trestle tables with tablecloths and stuff like that. Won't centre management just tell me if there's a problem? Some will. But often it's way too late by the time they realise. Being proactive is going to save you a heap of time, a heap of money, and a heap of stress. Another hurdle I see people battling with is when the centre requirements don't align with the vision for their design. And this is why it's so important to start talking about all the restrictions and guidelines nice and early. Sometimes they'll be able to offer you solutions that work for everybody, and you'll be able to tweak your design accordingly. When you understand the centre's requirements, you can sidestep ugly surprises and keep your timeline running smoothly. Number 2, the 360 budget sweep. I've worked on a whole bunch of pop-ups, but the cost for the space is a really good deal. But often I see people miss all the additional costs that come along with it. Stuff like parking costs, storage for stock or equipment, or even mandatory security. All that kind of stuff. Sound familiar? If you don't factor these in, you'll overspend, it'll impact your profit margin, and most likely you're gonna have to pull back on the design of your display. So to avoid this, I use my 360 budget sweep. This is a list of every possible charge we might be looking at, stuff like cleaning, power, security, and then add a buffer for any unexpected costs outside of this. So here's how you can figure this out. Ask a shopping centre for a comprehensive fee schedule from everything to storage to security. This is going to help you understand what things you might need and some of the things that you probably haven't even considered yet. Once I can identify which ones are going to apply, I add a 10% contingency just so I know I'm safe. And from there, we can compare that with the budget we've got available to truly understand all of the costs. This is what's going to allow you to get the best ROI on your campaign. Number 3, shopping centre synergy system. I remember a pop-up installation we were doing and our centre representative was off sick. There was no one there that could grant us access. And guess what? We lost a whole night's work. People often forget to establish a really strong relationship with their centre manager. When communication breaks down, schedules and approvals tend to stall. It's really easy to assume that once we pay for the space, everything's going to be sorted. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. If you don't have a direct line of communication when you're installing, you could risk being locked out, having to reschedule delivery, and this is going to impact everything. So this is exactly why I created the shopping centre synergy system. It's really simple. All we need to do is schedule a kickoff call with centre management after the space has been booked. And here's what's going to happen on that call. Firstly, we're going to identify the person from centre management who's going to be the representative for us when we're on site. They're the person that's going to be looking after us day to day until we're ready to install. Once we've established that, then we ask who the backup person's going to be if that person isn't available for whatever reason. And whoever that backup person is, we get their details. And lastly, we establish the timeline. We figure out whether we need to go in early or late, and we get all of that in writing. Most shopping centers are going to have restrictions in place for when you can install and pack down your display. Most likely, this is going to be between when the shops close and before they open the next morning. So in a lot of circumstances, you're going to be there during the night, and most likely you're going to be dealing with security and not necessarily your center manager contact. So my bonus tip here is to make sure security know you're coming. Ask your center manager to loop you in on an email with them. The last thing you want is to arrive on site and security say, "Who are you? I don't know anything about this." A strong rapport with center management is your lifeline. It streamlines everything from permits to last-minute tweaks. Number 4, the logistics mapping method. Sometimes big displays need to go down narrow corridors. The practicalities of moving large objects through the center can make your dream pop-up an absolute nightmare. We get so focused on the design that sometimes we forget about the mundane details like elevator sizes and door widths. If you don't figure this out, you risk damaging your display, delays that cost overtime, and a heap of frustration. This is why I created what I call the logistics mapping method. It's all about creating a clear path from the loading dock where your truck is all the way through the shopping center to the spot where you're going to be setting up. And here's how I use it. Firstly, I request a plan from the shopping center that shows me the path from the loading dock to where I am. It's going to show me escalators, lifts, and doors. From there, I can figure out how small the pieces need to be for the elements that we're going to be including in our pop-up design. And then lastly, I can plan how we're going to get back out of the space at the end so we're not there longer than we should be. The best thing I can recommend for you to do is to meet up with center management on site and do a walkthrough from the loading dock to where you're going to be setting up. That way, you're going to know exactly what you're in for when you arrive on the night. Another great thing you can do is also drive your car from the road to the loading dock, so that you're able to understand any height restrictions you might encounter on the night. Number 5, the power pop-up play. Once you've nailed down the shopping center's restrictions, the budget constraints, and the logistics, the big question is, how do we design a pop-up display with all of this in mind? We've got all the boring stuff out of the way, and now it's time for the fun bit. You know how big your space is, you know how to get in there, and you know what you can and can't do to keep everybody happy. It's time to start designing what your pop-up looks like. Depending on your budget, you might be looking for a full custom display, or you might be looking to use higher items to fill your space, or maybe it's a combination of both. And if you need a hand with any of that, let me know. The beauty of being armed with all of this information nice and early is that you're going to be able to get your design together really quickly. You're going to avoid all of the back and forth and all of the redesigns because center management and your design aren't aligned on what needs to happen for this thing to go live. A good design isn't just about looking pretty, it's about functionality, brand storytelling, and shopper engagement. By weaving this narrative into a layout that respects the research you did earlier, not only are you going to have a pop-up display that's practical and meets all the requirements of the center, but it's going to wow everybody that walks by. So there you have it. That's my shopping center pop-up process. And before we wrap this up, let's do a super quick recap. Number 1, understand the shopping center requirements. Number 2, understanding any potential unforeseen costs. Number 3, build a strong relationship with your center manager. Number 4, plan the install and pack down. And number 5, design something that ticks all of these boxes. If you cover these, you'll sidestep the pitfalls that trip a lot of people up. I hope this was useful. I'll catch you in the next one.